Perfect. Okay. Bill, we are live on YouTube. The podcast hasn't necessarily started. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat from, I think, screeching all throughout this Bears game. But my goodness, Bill, I know we started the season with a couple of games where it felt like the Bears could not possibly get out of their own way. And while technically, I guess you could make the argument that the defense felt the same way today, how great is it on just a pre-pod note as everybody settles in, they grab their beverage of choice, they pull up the live stream. How great was it seeing a young quarterback take a really strong next step today?
And look, and that's I think pretty much the entire Windy City Gridiron podcast channel is basically on the same page here about where this team was, the deficiencies that it had, and what we wanted to see out of Justin Fields. And then the first month or so of the season, you kind of start sitting there and cringing a little bit. But as we know, development isn't linear. There was a lot going on with Fields early with a new system, his third in 3 years. And these last few weeks, especially these last two, we've really seen, I think credit some to Luke Getsy here on some of this that's changed up. But man, it has been, bottom line, Justin Fields is fun. And he's a Chicago Bears quarterback. Like that, it just feels good to say it.
I mean, for crying out loud, Bill, like at this point, so the Bears did the unthinkable in today's NFL, and they stacked 2 weeks in a row where they averaged 31 and a half points. So I don't know what that's going to do, but as a math minor in school, Bill, that's going to juice their points per game average to easily over 20. Like the Chicago Bears offense is right about to be average. And the fact that they did that, where their wide receiver 2 is Equinemius St. Brown, for crying out loud. Their wide receiver 3, who gets real targets, by the way, is Dante Pettis. Like, this is borderline Herculean. I mean, the craziest part to me is that the Bears have now gone up against 2 extraordinarily good defenses in back-to-back weeks, and they've put up, if not because I can't remember the Patriots stats, but they put up more points on the Dallas Cowboys than they've ever given up this season. And this is the Bears. Like, what else am I supposed to point to? Bill, we've seen this. It's not Khalil Herbert running like crazy on these guys. Yes, he is, but Justin Fields is pulling a lot of attention away from everybody else on the football field and opening seams up for an offense. I feel like I must be living somebody's Xbox fever dream where Justin Fields became a superstar, because I know it sounds hyperbolic, but like Justin Fields right now is the difference on offense. And in 4 years of covering Mitch Trubisky, had to make sure it wasn't 5, we could never say that about Mitch. That we could point to Allen Robinson, we could point to the running game, we could point to Taylor Gabriel at times, we could point to occasionally Mitch, but it feels like right now the plan that the opposing defense has to deal with is Justin Fields is a problem. And I cannot believe the Bears have a quarterback they can say that about.
Yeah, he's, and we've seen it kind of pop up by some of the, the not you and me, but I'm talking about the analysts sitting on ESPN and Fox and everything, that he is, with his legs, the second most dangerous quarterback in the league behind Lamar Jackson. And there's no reason to dispute that. Mm-hmm. And that's what, and you bring up Trubisky, and, I definitely try to not bash.
I also hate the comparisons, so I hear you before you go there.
Yeah, but I feel like the plan with Mitch, right, was, well, Mitch has some deficiencies, so let's build up an offense around him so we can have an efficient offense while Trubisky learns. But this is at a point where there is no talent around, and Fields needs to learn and Fields needs to develop. So let's use Justin Fields as a weapon while Justin Fields learns. Like, that's how good he is. And we're really seeing it the last 2 weeks. And like you said, this is not the Detroit Lions, who I don't know if they still statistically have the worst defense in the league, but if they don't, they're close. This is quality defenses that are, I mean, and I talked about it with Courtney Cronin on my podcast last week. I mean, Bill Belichick is one of the great defensive minds in NFL history, maybe the top defensive mind in NFL history. He's on the short list regardless. Yep. And he had no answer for Justin Fields. The Cowboys defense, right at the top of it, no answer for Justin Fields. And his stats may not have been that gaudy today, But, and I'm sure we'll get into it, like some of the miscues that the wide receivers and others had, that those stats could have been a bit better. But when you watched him play, I don't know, it was 140 yards passing, whatever he had. You didn't feel like he had 140 yards passing because he was making decisive throws. He wasn't hesitating. They were accurate throws. They weren't those, way off target throws we saw early in the season. It felt like he had control of the game. And I understand they lost by 3 touchdowns, and I'm sure we'll get into the defense a little bit, but it was just the command he has of the offense the last couple of weeks really makes you feel good about things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Bill, I'll go off on a pre-pod rant for a moment. So as Justin Fields has really started to open up this season, I'd say since the Minnesota game. Frankly, if you wanted to go back a little further, we saw signs of a corner turning against the Giants. And by a corner, to be clear, I mean, he was headed towards Bustville. I'll break the word out because I just don't think we're there right now. Like after the Texans games, things looked grim because he just had the Packers game where the most notable play was missing Equanimeous St. Brown deep downfield, just not even seeing him, and then taking a sack on the play. Not good. Actually, I think it was a check down. Not important. Then he had the Texans game where it felt like he was trying to lose. He was playing so badly. And then against the Giants, we started to see things get a little better. Fast forward to now. Right. Since then, Bill, I've been trying to do my best to pay attention to quarterback stats around the NFL. Right. Because obviously everybody brings up Justin Fields' yards. And it's like, well, okay, how are other quarterbacks doing? Patrick Mahomes, for the overwhelming majority of last week's demolition against the 49ers, where I don't know if you watched the game, but if you did, I think you'd agree with me. He had a fabulous game, finished with, if memory serves, right around 250 passing yards. That's Patrick Mahomes. Like, yards aren't looking like what we've seen in the past couple of years, where there were all these single high defenses that wanted to stop the run first and were allowing a ton of yardage through the air. Passing, scoring, it's all way down right now,
right?
Which isn't an excuse. It's more to say, Bill, I hate to be the guy who tries to almost oversimplify football, but can't we just look at the points on the board? Can't we just say even the Eagles didn't score 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys, but the Chicago Bears did? Like, at what point can't the eye test be meaningful enough? Where I get it. There's people out there that are saying, we got to calm down. He only threw for 211 yards. Honestly, Bill, who cares? Like, right. Justin Fields had 3 touchdowns, led 3 touchdown drives, led 4 touchdown drives, had like 3 touchdowns himself, all off of quality plays. Could have had more if his wide receivers could haul in a pass at the end of the first half. Like, why do I need to fret over the fact that he's not exploding on passing totals? Like, yes, it's great that passing totals on certain teams are like, I'll use a very explicit example, Bill. Tua Tagovailoa has not blown me away this season, but his receivers are incredible. So his passing stats are amazing. What is the meaning in that, right? It's good that you can win with him. He's certainly had plenty of solid games, but it's not really Justin Fields' fault, in my personal opinion, that the Bears are succeeding on the ground with a very Greg Roman-esque meets Shanahan, like quarterback run plus really solid running attack. Fields' EPA per play looks great. Like the real true advanced metrics that talk about his efficiency per opportunity, love what he's doing right now. So his ultimate volume metrics, they just don't mean anything. I wish they did. But if somebody quotes at me or chirps at me saying that he only had 211 yards, he obviously wasn't that big a deal. Trevor Siemian, how many points do you think he scores today? Same team.
Oh, sure. Like, yeah, 10.
10? I don't even know if he gets 10.
Yeah,
like,
maybe not.
The guys who were the top 5 NFL top 5 offense in the NFL, the Lions scored 6 points against this Dallas defense with their starters. Like, it's wild what Fields did today. And I mean, it sucks that the defense got railroaded, right? But if they have to sacrifice so that we got a great Justin Fields game, might have been worth it. Anyways, You want to record the pod?
Let me just run into the other room because I left my small dog beached on the bed and he's barking. So be right back.
Do it. like you're saying, Akusai, I think the obvious and exclusive solution is to just run the ball on second down more. But so like I think it's wild to me how many people wanted. I don't know, passing stats. Lester, what are you doing here? We've got Lester Wiltfong in the side. Lester, I'm gonna put you on the screen if you don't watch out. Like Lester, what you doing?
Fixing the colors, my friend. Why you got green? Bear with me.
Oh,
Get back to the show, brother. I got you. I got you back. Get back to the show.
You got it. You got it. Oh, in case it's a problem. Like the running it on second down is a disease, and Luke Getsy does not have a cure. But and all the same, Bill, you look ready. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do this thing. What is going on, everybody? And welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel. I am here with Bill Zimmerman breaking down a Bears loss to the Cowboys where I don't know how it happened, Bill, but somehow the Bears just lost a football game by 20 points, and I am ecstatic. The Bears offense scored more points than anybody scored against the number 2 defense DVOA-wise in football than they've had scored on them all season long. Fields looked like not only there was a plan, but that he executed that plan well. He seems like he's taken real steps forward. I understand he ultimately ended up taking 4 sacks. None of the sacks felt as egregious as some of the sacks we've seen earlier this year. Frankly, they looked like a good Dallas defense eventually getting theirs. I don't know. I can't believe I am as over the moon as a game filled with so much defensive sloppiness. But for a year that we've all labeled developmental, at least here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel, Bill, this feels like everything we could have possibly wanted. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I feel good about this game. This was a very good Dallas Cowboys team. This was a top-notch defense, as you mentioned, and how Justin Fields looked offensively. And it doesn't. This is one of those things where this is an eye test kind of a thing. You know, you don't want to sit there. Well, Justin Fields didn't throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He didn't run for 125 yards, whatever it might be. That if you just hunt box scores to decide if guys are playing well or not, you're going to miss the forest for the trees here, because Justin Fields, he was decisive with the football. He is electric when the football is in his hands. And some of the things, the development, it's not just the command that he has of the offense. I'll bring up 2 little plays that I loved today that really just kind of show you Justin Fields growing. One, and it's a simple one. He threw the ball away when he rolled out towards the sideline in the second half. He has been taking sacks over there. I mean, we used to scream at Mitch Trubisky for running out of bounds 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage instead of throwing it away. Justin Fields would keep taking sacks over by the sideline when he was out of the pocket. No intentional grounding. Justin, throw the football away. Today, he did that. And the other thing he did that I loved was on I don't remember the exact situation. It was third down. I think it was about 3rd and 4. And Fields was rolling out to his left, and the defender was spied on him really well. He was really kind of trapped. And Fields was running, but he held up for a second like, hey, I'm going to throw the football. Got the defender to slow down, and then he took off, zipped right past him, and got the first down. That awareness of what he can do and how to manipulate a defender and knowing to throw the ball away, those are the type of things you didn't see him doing in week 1 and week 2. So forget just the dynamic runs he's having and forget, the decisive throws. It's these little things that are going to give him a complete game that just, like you said, over the moon, you feel really good. I mean, when I did my podcast after the Vikings game, it was all positive because of Justin Fields' second half. And this isn't a second half performance. This is really a start to finish performance.
It's a complete game.
You really have to feel good about Justin Fields.
I mean, you have to, right? To use a couple of more, Bill, not only did the Bears get the chunk plays, not only did we see multiple plays. I mean, I could think to myself of probably 4 at least that I don't think were arguable that better receivers make the play. A better receiver at least draws defensive pass interference on the underthrown deep ball to Equinemius St. Brown, which I don't care that it was underthrown because the defender had his back turned. When you leave that ball short, you're guaranteeing a flag normally, and plenty of receivers catch that ball almost every single Sunday. But if you're annoyed about deep ball placement, he put a ball right in Velus Jones' hands that Jones couldn't haul in 45 yards downfield at least. I thought the throw to Pettis was really solid. I thought the second throw in the end zone to Equinemius St. Brown was really solid. There were tons of throws throughout this game that if you really wanted to be ticky-tack about all his teammates let him down, then like, okay, you can, but even better, Bill, on that throw to Velus. So that cost him a down. It was 2nd and 10. Then he followed it up with the Houdini-like escape where he was able to get Leighton Vander Esch to turn his hips, sink backwards, and then he continued on to ultimately throw that touchdown we saw to N'Keal Harry. I mean, Fields overcame adversity consistently within this game. Even further, Bill, Fields has gotten better about dealing with the rusher that's coming at him during the quick game so that he can lean to the side and just kick the ball out sidearm for 6 to 8 yard gains on first down.
Yeah, love some of those arm angle throws today.
Right?
They're great.
It's little. A lot of these things are subtle. Pressure in his face. He threw a strike to Darnell Mooney to crack open a drive that ultimately finished in a Khalil Herbert touchdown. Not everything is statistically sexy, and I get it. But also on the fumble play, which sure, I would love it if Justin touched Micah Parsons down. I'd love it even more if David Montgomery didn't fumble when he was in the wide open field. But sure, we can give him a loaf for that. Can I at least sing the praises, Bill, about the fact that he got out of the pocket, he drew a rusher, and then he checked it to Demo anyways and gave him a chance to convert on a 3rd and 17. Like, Montgomery was one broken tackle away from getting the yardage. This felt like a top to bottom clinical performance for from a quarterback, especially a year 2 quarterback. And on a day, if I'm allowed to be comparative, Bill, because I know technically his compatriots don't make a difference to Justin Fields, but on a day where Trevor Lawrence concluded his game in London with a nasty interception that ultimately iced the game, on a day where both Mac Jones and Zach Wilson looked particularly bad, with Zach Wilson throwing 3 interceptions, again, marching into Dallas. This was the second dry game they've played all year. And surprise, surprise, Fields looked confident. He looked comfortable. He delivered the ball where it needed to be, when it needed to be there. And not every single play was ostensibly successful. I can't sit here and pretend that, wow, everything was perfect. But for crying out loud, the plays that weren't, like, I know at least one of the sacks, the Bears tried to run like a crossers play similar to mesh, and just nobody was open. Because there is a talent gap between the number 2 defense and one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL. But when you're finding Cole Kmet, this is a bit of a jab, but I'll do it anyways. When you're finding Cole Kmet open in the end zone for his first touchdown in over 2 years, you're doing something right. So I'll credit Getsy, who's getting a lot of heat because he's calling an unconventional game. So does Greg Roman. A lot of people hate it. But again, number 2 defense, after having done the same thing to Bill Belichick, is giving a lot of people a lot of problems. And like, yes, again, there were imperfections, there were blemishes. I'll ask you a silly one, Bill. Do you think we have to take the interception that he coulda, shoulda, woulda thrown on the roughing the passer, or the interception that he coulda, shoulda, woulda thrown to Dante Pettis all too seriously, or within the context of the game, do they really not change much for you?
Yeah, see, it doesn't change much for me because there's you can play a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda on both ways, right? What if Velus catches the ball? What if Brown catches it? Like, I can go, you want to sit there and play what if with the interceptions. I can play what if with the deep balls that they could not catch. I mean, and these were throws that weren't, oh, well, if he catches it, it's a great throw. But if he doesn't catch it, you understand, or it's a great catch. But if he doesn't catch it, you understand it's a hard catch to make. No, these were right on the hands. They were perfectly thrown footballs, and Fields got nothing but an incomplete pass for him. So if that's going to happen, where he's losing 70, 80, 100 yards because of some poor play by the receivers, then certainly I'm not going to fault him for getting fortunate on an interception.
Exactly. I mean, look, I get it. plenty of people out there want to see more, but I also think, frankly, that Chicago can be, I don't know. I think Chicago can kind of be a pressure cooker sometimes, Bill. I know it's the corniest comment that you see on the internet when people are like, you're being too hard on professional millionaire. But at the same time, that's what good quarterbacking looks like. I mean, you put up 29 points, you should win a football game. Don't you think? And so we do have to talk at least a little bit about the defense. I mean, Bill, what do you think went wrong?
I mean, look, I think the bottom line here is, first of all, let's talk about the talent gap. And let's talk about that Dak Prescott is the top 10 quarterback. And let's talk about Tony Pollard is the best running back on Dallas. He is now better than Ezekiel Elliott. And he showed that again today. And CeeDee Lamb is a quality NFL receiver and made some nice plays. You know, Schultz is a solid tight end. They've got talent everywhere. This is a good offense. You know, the people who are like, they're winning with Cooper Rush, they should keep Cooper Rush out there. Those people just needed to have, you know, a piece of tape slapped across their mouths, because that was just ludicrous talk. So, I mean, the bottom line is here, first of all, you have to look at a talent gap. The Bears have had a couple moments better defending the run, but this is a team that cannot defend the run well, largely because of the guys up front. They are not ready for that type of, you know, dynamic runner that Pollard can be. You know, Roquan was not particularly, you know, outstanding today. And, you know, the bottom line is, you know, the secondary, some of these guys that had been pretty sticky had some bad moments. And I know, you know, Eddie Jackson with a nice interception and all, but, you know, Kindle Vildor got beat a couple times. Brisker got beat. You know, there was, you know, these type of things happen when you have quality offensive players on the other side of the ball. Now, 49 points, that's, you know, especially the way things went in the first half where they had no way to stop the Dallas Cowboys. And I think the Cowboys finished right around 9 yards a play. I mean, when you're grabbing that per play, there's just no way to stop an offense. And, you know, this is a defense that, you know, I was talking about this kind of last week. This is a defense that does have talent gaps. You know, we focus on the offense because the offensive gaps are more glaring, but this defense does have talent gaps. And credit Williams and credit Flus for a lot of this season, having this unit play as well as it has, despite having those talent gaps. And I think this particular game was just one of those games where, you know, I guess they played a little better in the second half, the defense, but it was too much to overcome. They got back on their heels. You know, they just felt tired a lot of times. You saw hands on the hips. And I just think that this Dallas offense just took it to them.
I mean, truly, Bill, you're not going to win a lot of football games when you start out giving up 4 straight touchdowns in your first 4 drives. I mean, the worst part about this, I would say, like defensively speaking, is we've talked on this podcast before. I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast before. The defensive line doesn't have a ton of juice on it. I mean, you definitely don't have what you'd call a run plugger. And the Bears just traded Robert Quinn. So even though I know he's not super helpful in the run game, you did like get worse on defensive line over the last week. Sure. So now you trot this defensive line out. You go up against Dallas. Dallas has a solid offensive line. They're not one of the best in football, but they're certainly pretty good. And they just graded the Bears. And right now, if you want to take advantage of the Bears defense, what you got to do is you got to show you can run the ball. They did. They ran it. Would you believe it, Bill? 29 times for 200 yards. That is 6.9 yards per carry. And if you felt like I did, it sure felt like it. I mean, it felt like anytime they wanted to run the ball, they could. So that meant that all the play action that they went with Dak Prescott, that has been killing the Bears this year. Play action, once you show that you can run the ball a little bit. I know tons of people out there. I'm not so sure. Statistics say that you don't actually have to run the ball well or for play action to make a difference. Against the Bears in particular makes a huge difference. And it just started to look easy for Dak Prescott, who I don't even know if we necessarily got, I don't know how much pressure the Bears actually got. They got 1 sack on the day, but that felt like about it, where Justin Fields was having to dip and duck around complicated pockets. Dak Prescott felt like he was out on a practice field, Bill. I mean, it looked awful. some of it, I'm sure, was some of the disguises that the Bears were trying to do. But when you give up 25 yards in a quarterback sneak, when CeeDee Lamb gets wide open off of Jaquan Brisker, not really knowing how to play cover 3 zone coverage as a safety, there were a lot of things going on. I can't help thinking it largely starts up front. But gosh, I mean, not a great day for the defense, where the only positive thing I could say about it is, Bill, there are a lot of pieces on this defense that are just not going to be here next year. Like, yes, we could talk about, say, Eddie Jackson, who I thought was up and down. Obviously, he made the clear biggest play the defense had on this team,
Sure.
or like with a pick that was classic Eddie Jackson. But at the same time, I mean, like, you tell me, how committed do you really think the Bears are to, I'll name them, Angelo Blackson, Dominique Robinson as a starting edge rusher, Travis Gibson as a starting edge rusher, Justin Jones as they've got Nick Morrow. They've got Kendall Vildor still as a starting corner. Like, how many positions on this defense do you really think are locked in for next year?
Yeah, and look, and there is just a handful. Even Roquan Smith. I assume Roquan Smith's going to be back and most likely on the tag. I don't know if they're actually going to come to a long-term agreement, but they're really, I mean, other than the two second rounders and Jalen Johnson, you really don't feel that like Eddie Jackson has been fantastic. And if he keeps playing like this, overall, he's going to be back next year. But at Eddie Jackson's age, if he tails off in the second half of this season, they might even go another direction there. There is no one that's that safe on this defense overall, especially up front. Are they just going to dump Travis Gibson for no reason? Of course not. He's under contract. It's a rookie deal. He'll make some plays from time to time. So of course not. But, we bring this up all the time when you talk about like what Ryan Pace did after Phil Emery and how much he did. And the only defender he kept was Kyle Fuller. But when he took over, you did not necessarily expect Kyle Fuller to last on this defense because he got hurt. And then he played really poorly. And then he just came into his own and figured it out. Someone like Kendall Vildor, could he be that? I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Kyle Fuller was at Kyle Fuller, but is he one of those guys that we all wrote off after how atrocious he was, to start his career? Has improved tremendously. I'm not sitting there saying he's an all-pro or a Pro Bowl caliber player, but he has improved tremendously, and maybe that continues, where you sit there and go, maybe Vildor could be a piece, where we didn't expect that at all. But, I mean, you can kind of circle some guys in the secondary as pieces, and Roquan can play football, and it just kind of depends on how things shake out financially, whether he's here or not. But, Justin Jones was a stopgap signing after Ogunjobi didn't work out. And Blackson is just a guy, and Pennell is a guy. And those are guys that are just, until they find their defensive tackle, those are the guys who are just filling time up front. And that's, I'll give, I think it was Olin Kreutz credit. Now, I know a lot of Olin Kreutz has been getting a lot of crap from a lot of Bears fans for Sam Mustipher defense. But at the beginning of the year, he said the defensive line is going to be a bigger problem this year than the offensive line. And the offensive line is weird. It's this Jekyll and Hyde with the pass pro and the run blocking. But when you see the game like it was today, and we haven't really gotten into the offensive line, I'm sure we will, that seems like an accurate statement because they don't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and they certainly struggle stopping the run.
I mean, Bill, they're categorically awful. Like, they showed that stat at the start of the game, and I'm not trying to pretend that Fox necessarily hits us with the greatest stats on earth, but the Bears are 29th in run defense, even after 2 relatively decent weeks of defending the run. I mean, the teams that can run on them, I'll use a couple. Packers, the Packers game was horrible. The Texans game was fine, but the Vikings game was horrible again. This Dallas game was horrible. I'm surprised it wasn't worse in New England, if I can be really honest with you. And the 49ers had an easy day running the ball too. When you can, you do. I mean, the defensive line just doesn't really get you any stops out of the ordinary at the very least. And that in and of itself, it would be a bigger problem if we had any expectations that they would have been good in the first place. I mean, that's, I think, where I'm at peace is that I'm not watching Akeem Hicks suddenly struggle. right? This isn't the Eddie Goldman fall off where he came back after the opt-out year and then couldn't control two gaps quite like he could, but was still being paid that big time money.
Sure.
This is Angela Blackson, who's a reserve defensive tackle that's being asked to play a starter's load. This is Justin Jones, who was the 3 technique on the worst run defense team in the NFL last year. And would you believe it? Somehow the poor run defense followed him. Funny how that works, isn't it? I mean, this Bears defense isn't done yet. To use an EJ Snyder example that I think was on your show, like the house isn't fully built. It burned down a while ago, and we're still just putting a couple of rooms together bit by bit at a time. And so there's some of this stuff that I know I'm relaxed about it now because expectations are where they are. And in the future, obviously, if they invest some money and those guys don't come through, that'll be a real shame. But for now, all we're really doing is watching a lot of the young defensive backs. And I mean, the Bears keep getting put in this spot, Bill, if I could go on like a schematic soliloquy for a moment, where Kendall Vildor, for instance, is not a great cover 3 corner and just a very okay at best cover 1 corner. He's really good at cover 2 and cover 4. Now, as I'm sure you know, Bill, you call cover 1 and cover 3 when you're either in man or when you're trying to stick an extra safety in the box to do what? To defend the run. So these teams that can run the ball are pushing the Bears into situations where I don't think their players are near as good as when they've got more DBs on the field in, say, cover 2 or cover 4 or cover 6 or any of the more pass-oriented defensive back coverage. So you add some beef on this defensive line, and I really do think this game plan could work. The problem is that until then, we've got a couple more Cowboys left on the schedule. Like we get the Bills. They'll do it again.
Yep. That's the thing is the beef isn't coming this year. That's the problem. And you know, when you look at this roster, and we can talk about the talent deficiencies, but if you look at every position group, there are guys in the position group, you know, tight end, it depends on whether you like Cole Kmet or not. But you know, the other position groups, you know, you see it, like you can see Khalil Herbert and what he can do with the football. We know Darnell Mooney is a good wide receiver. Roquan Smith, we know, is a good off-ball linebacker. You know, we talked about the secondary already. You look at all those position groups and you may be like, wide receiver is dreadful, but Darnell Mooney is there, right? When you look at the defensive line, especially now that Robert Quinn has been traded, and, you know, let's not pretend that Robert Quinn was, you know, having a 2021 season again. But when you look at this defensive line without Robert Quinn, who is a player like a Darnell Mooney or a Tevin Jenkins or, you know, any of those secondary guys or Roquan, who is a player on this defensive line that you circle and say, if this Bears team, if this rebuild works and they're contending for a Super Bowl in 2024, like the 2018 team did, you know, kind of build up 3 years from now, are any of those defensive linemen going to be key contributors on this team? I mean, Travis Gibson, maybe he's a starting edge, maybe he's a rotational edge. Dominic Robinson,
a rotational guy,
maybe a rotational edge. Like they might, you know, still be on this roster, Dominic Robinson, because they'll still be on a rookie deal, kind of a thing. But you're not circling any of these. You're not circling one defensive lineman as Akeem Hicks or even Leonard Floyd or obviously Khalil Mack or Eddie Goldman, that defensive front that they had before that could do so much on their own as a front four. They could stop the run on their own. You know, Leonard Floyd, for as much crap as Bears fans and everyone gave him, was great at setting the edge opposite Khalil Mack. You know, so you had a defensive front before of 4 guys that allowed Eddie Jackson to do the things he could, that Fangio could do, and they could stop the run a decent amount when those 4 guys were healthy without having to bring extra guys up in the box. When you have a front 4 like that, it just opens up so many things defensively. And when you have the exact opposite, then everyone in that back 7 has to do extra to try and keep this defense. And it's been working in the second halves of games. But, you know, today it didn't.
Nope. And you know what? That just doesn't bother me. I mean, truly, like this is year 1 of a culture change, Bill. I mean, if anything, it points the finger at the things that obviously need upgrading. Now, it's funny that you mentioned the beef and how it's not coming, because if there is one thing that I think might give Bears fans hives, obviously everybody, myself included, I got to be honest, wants to see the Bears draft a receiver in the first round. of this next year. And no, we don't need to talk about the draft, but I will say that yes, post-game podcast, the Bears just gave up 42 defensive points. And just because they turned it over and got scored on for the 7th doesn't necessarily mean, Bill, that the offense wouldn't have come right on down and scored more points had the Bears given their offense the chance to. 0 field goals, for crying out loud. All touchdowns. They either got stopped and punted, or also the pick, or they just kept scoring. Rough day for the defense. But I got to ask, Bill, you've seen the Vita Veas that play in this league, the Aaron Donalds. Like, the guys that you get in the first round are just different than the guys that you get in the second round. How likely, just while we're, I guess, a little bit tangential, do you think it is that the Bears actually take, say, a receiver or an offensive player in the first round versus some defensive beef that would obviously go a very long way?
Yeah. And look, and that's the thing. And, I think you and I talked about it when you were on my pod over the summer that, depending on where the Bears draft and depending on how things fall, that if they have that opportunity to get that special 3-tech, that they may go out and get that special 3-tech. And if they do, then they better turn around, and yeah, we don't need to talk about the next offseason too much, but you better turn around in the second round and take a wide receiver, because you can get elite wide receivers in round 2. Yeah. There's a laundry list of phenomenal wide receivers that came out of round 2 or later. Usually by about round 3, you don't really find them in rounds 4, 5, and 6. I'm talking about those elite level wide receivers. You can get good wide receivers, but those elite level, usually you can find them in round 2 and round 3. So they better come back and do that, because, look, I know they have an obscene amount of money that they can spend, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. But are they, and I see people on Twitter and stuff a lot. Oh, well, they could trade for this guy and that guy, trying to talk about wide receivers that they could get. But if Darnell Mooney is going to stick around on this roster, he's probably going to have to get somewhere near $20 million a year. If Mooney sticks around, is Ryan Poles going to pay 2 wide receivers over $20 million a year? I don't know if he's going to. Could he, but if you pay for 1 wide receiver and then you pay for like a mid-level, $12, $13 million guy and draft a guy, well, now you've got a core group of guys here that can be a special wide receiver unit. So I think that's going to be interesting this offseason, is to see how Ryan Poles kind of uses the funds he has and doesn't, spend egregiously, spends intelligently, and realizes that, yes, they need wide receivers, but they also need defensive linemen. There's plenty of, offensive line. There are plenty of expensive positions that the Bears have holes on that they are not going to be able to fill in just the draft. They have the money to do it. So, yeah. So that's the other thing. Like, how do you build a wide receiver unit? You've got to draft some, and they, you see like Jalen Hurts and what he's doing with Brown and that kind of thing. Look, I like Darnell Mooney. Is Darnell Mooney ever going to be that elite top 6, 7 receiver in the league kind of threat? I don't know if he's going to be. Is he going to be a quality receiver in a wide receiver group? Absolutely. Is he going to make great plays and great catches? Absolutely. But is he that difference maker where Justin Fields has it on 3rd and 9 and he just knows every time he's just got to put it up and Darnell Mooney's going to grab it for him? I don't know if Mooney's at that level. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how all this plays out.
Right. And look, for anybody out there that's listened this far into the podcast and they are frustrated, but for some reason you have kept listening. First of all, thank you. We always appreciate the support. But second of all, if there's a reason, just to make sure it's clear, that Bill and I are talking about other player additions within this, it's because this defense isn't scheme away. I don't know about you, Bill. It's not like I'm staring at Allen Williams on a game like this and saying, wow, he sucked. The Bears weren't really put in particularly bad positions. There's just not a great way to scheme around the fact that whenever the Cowboys wanted to open up a gaping hole on the ground, they just had to run 2 running plays, because if they didn't get it the first time, they definitely got it the second. It felt as if the Bears were able to block, what would you say, like about 1.5 guys per player. At least it felt that way, where when they wanted to move, they could. And that's that there's just not a lot of great schematic answers to that don't put your guys on islands in pass coverage. And when Kendall Vildor was on an island against Michael Gallup, Gallup's a better player. When CeeDee Lamb has Eddie Jackson one-on-one, I love Eddie Jackson, but any good wide receiver up against a safety one-on-one, if the safety wins that matchup, he's a magician. There's just, it's not that we're trying to be doom and gloom. We just want to be as real as possible about the fact that some pieces of this defense are not talent away. It's not Angelo Blackson had a bad game. It's the entire unit got smoked, and that's okay. I mean,
there's a talent gap. It's very clear. And this Cowboys game was almost great just to see the talent gap. Forget the scheme, forget how Fields performed, forget Getsy, forget all that. Just the players on the field and their one-on-one, opportunities. The Cowboys had more talent, period. And
both sides of the ball.
Yeah. And you saw the talent gap there. And there's coaching can only take you so far. You still need the talent on the field to turn, games into W's. And the Bears don't have that yet. And that's going to take a little while. And the one thing I just want to respond to kind of Chris Armstrong and Cole World there about Darnell Mooney. And I don't know if Mooney's going to get $20 million, but here's what I will say about what we've seen this year in the NFL. Previously, offensive coordinators were able to scheme open mediocre wide receivers. So mediocre wide receivers get 6, 7, 800 yards and be impactful in the offense. But we're seeing a lot more defenses play back. You're seeing a lot more defenses sitting in cover 2, not as much single high. And what's happening in that? They're saying, we're not going to give you a 6-play, 75-yard drive opportunity anymore. You're going to need 12 or 13 plays to go 75 yards, and you're going to have to keep the ball underneath. And those mediocre wide receivers that we're getting schemed open the last couple of years, they're not open anymore. So what is the difference makers in the offense again? You're seeing the elite wide receivers making a difference again, where those wide receivers who are more talented than their defensive player that's guarding them are getting open and finding the holes in the zones and the gaps in the seams. So we're seeing wide receivers becoming more important again on the offense. Now, is Darnell Mooney that difference maker? I don't know. But is Darnell Mooney good enough where another NFL team might think he's a difference maker, where he's going to say, if I'm not getting 20 million or at least 18, 19 million, remember what Chase, what Deontay Johnson and those type of guys got. If he's not getting that kind of money from the Bears, he may sit there and go, well, I think somebody is going to give me that money. So we can sit there and say Darnell Mooney's not a $20 million talent, and he probably isn't. But in a free agent world where you want wide receivers who can make the difference, if the Bears don't think he is, someone probably will pay him that.
And Bill, we do this every single year, don't we? We take a player, we say he'll probably get fill in the blank money. And then everybody says, oh, come on, he's not worth fill in the blank money. He's worth 75% less than that. And you're both right. I mean, we're talking about 2024's money. This year's, I guess in this year's money terms, it's like a $16 million player, but then a year in the future, it's 10% increase. So now we're up to about $18 million. And then a year after that, it's another 10% increase. So we're up to about $20 million. I mean, I would tell you guys right now, if Darnell Mooney was dominating harder, he'd get way more than 25 million or than $20 million a year. And so it's, I mean, like, I hear you, but the Bears are going to have almost $120 million in cap space. You could spend that on a whole new defensive line, a brand new linebacker, Roquan extension, Jalen extension, Mooney extension, and still have some money left over. Like, there's a lot of cash on the Bears. So a lot to get excited about when you're as cheap on offensive line as maybe you can be. Bill, we're going to step aside because the sponsors have been begging to get their word in. But on that, or afterwards,
I do want to ask you a couple your door down, telling them to take a break.
Right. After that, I want to make sure we step aside and I want to ask you about this offensive line, because there are some pieces of it that I think are starting to excite. But let's get out of the way and we'll be right back. And we are back with Bear With Me. I'm here with Bill Zimmerman. We're talking through a Bears Cowboys game that left us with quite a lot to talk about. We've covered Fields, though, Bill. The receivers, I personally believe they speak for themselves. Look, I am not going to come out here and try to just tear down Equinemius St. Brown and Dante Pettis for being Equinemius St. Brown and Dante Pettis. We know who they are. If anything, I would debate they're overperforming because they're making certain pieces of the offense competent, which is amazing enough, because it's not that like, wow, ESB is so bad. It's more that we are talking about a guy that got cut by the Packers and now he's starting for the Chicago Bears. But specifically when it comes to offensive line, Bill, look, I know the Bears can't get away from playing Sam Mustafer, and apparently it's just impossible. Like, he will find a way back into the roster. But left tackle Braxton Jones, is it just me or is he starting to come together? What do you think?
Braxton Jones definitely had, I thought, it's one of those things where you watch the game and you never know quite if you're missing stuff, right? Especially with the offensive line. I always try and keep my eye on the offensive line as much as possible. But look, when you just watch it in real time and you're just kind of glancing down and seeing what the right side does this play, what the left side does this play, it's hard to get a full picture on how everything looked. But Braxton Jones really got out well and moved against the Patriots. I thought there were a lot of plays, kind of sweeps to the left where Jones was out in the second level, making blocks, leading the way, and just really looked the part. And he's had, a couple rough games, especially kind of understanding what he was supposed to be doing within the plays previous to that. Now, we've seen some positives with him in the run game and, some struggles in the pass game and whatever it might be. But he's been up and down a little bit and a little worrisome. Where is this guy going to get to that next level? But now you're seeing these last couple of weeks, you're seeing really solid performances from Braxton Jones, and you're seeing those solid performances without Cody Whitehair next to him. Right. And I'm a big believer in offensive linemen that, the sum is greater than the individual parts, right? They need to be cohesive.
Yes.
I would much rather have, if we're, grading guys, I would much rather have 5 70s than, 2 95s and 3 45s. Because the 95s can't carry the other guys, and those other guys are just going to get blown up. So, And I think that was kind of Ryan Pace's mentality. And then we don't need to get into all Pace's offensive line issues, but Jones, and I'll tell you what, even if you're not an offensive line junkie, spend a few plays a game just watching Tevin Jenkins. I am thoroughly, especially in the run game, my God. I mean, his guys are getting knocked back 4 or 5 yards almost every play. He is just a steamroller out there making plays, and he's helping out his other offensive linemen in pass. He's always looking for work, meaning if there's no one coming at you in the pass block, that you're looking left, looking right, and just leveling a guy. I mean, what he did to Matthew Judon last week against New England, I mean, Jenkins just looks great out there. And I am really enjoying, he gets to the second level really well, which I wasn't sure if that was going to be his game, but I think that is his game. Even if he just gets like a little body on a guy, you'll see a linebacker just fall back 3 yards. There was a play where Jenkins was supposed to have backside contain on the backer, and there was a sweep to the left. And I don't remember if it was Herbert or Montgomery, probably Herbert, but there was a sweep to the left, and Jenkins couldn't quite get out there, but he just got onto his arm and just hit him enough where he knocked the backer back a good 3 or 4 yards, where by the time he got over to the sidelines, and he was actually the guy who made the tackle, but it was already after we had gained like 7 or 8 yards instead of 3 yards. Because that's the kind of stuff, those little things that Tevin Jenkins is doing. So really like what I saw from Jenkins, because I kind of paid attention to the right side a lot today, because I wanted to see what Riley Reif still had in the tank, which looked pretty good from what I could tell. I want to go back and see kind of what he did, and compare to what Larry Borum's been doing out there. But I'm really enjoying Tevin Jenkins, and Braxton Jones certainly seems to be coming into his own, especially both those guys in the run game.
Apologies. Sounds like I was muted. So
I
I'll
didn't know
fix
if you
that
were
in
muted
post.
or if there was an issue with my
No,
computer.
that's on me. That's on my end.
All right.
So I'll start that whole thing over. Bill, if you're gonna tell me that while I've been watching Larry Borum get absolutely smoked by every solid edge rusher he faces, obviously we're talking about very talented players like Rashad Gary, like Nick Bosa, like Matthew Judon, while Riley Reef could apparently hold his own against Demarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, I'm going to be frustrated. But let's set that aside. I mean, this podcast sometimes turns this Bears team this year is turning me into a hyperbolic homer because when I say Tevin Jenkins is starting to look like one of the best guards in football, that obviously he's still very raw, but like you're saying, when he is at his best, he is a difference maker from the guard position, which is hard to find. I mean, whether it, like you're saying, sometimes these are backside contains, but within this run scheme in particular, your guards carry a lot of work. I mean, they're the ones who have to get out to the second level, and because they're the ones out at the second level, they're the ones that can really determine whether your run is a solid gain or a huge gain. And is it really so surprising, Bill, that we're now starting to see runs that either hit to the right side or cut back to the right side that Khalil Herbert's starting to take for some massive gains, like on the ground? Tevin Jenkins is leading the way, and so is Braxton Jones. I mean, Braxton Jones is like watching Charles Leno inverted right now, where his pass blocking is just okay, but and hopefully it gets better. Sure, his run blocking is really good. Like Braxton Jones on these tackle pull plays is getting out, and you can see in the eyes of defensive backs that they're just not really used to a tackle charging at them like that, because most left tackles don't. Like, it's a pass protection league, and so a young gun like Braxton Jones getting out on the move and coming after people is just less common. The Bears are using it well. Look, it's not as simple as saying that they're cobbling together an offensive line out of two guys and some backups. But I will say that, like, I don't have high expectations for Michael Schofield. I'm not about to critique Michael Schofield any more than he deserves. What I will say is I think Fields is starting to manage the pocket a little bit better. I think the offensive line in particular is starting to realize, it seems, that they can wash guys down and that Fields will get out of the way. That basically they're starting to learn not necessarily like what Fields likes, but how to help Fields create these jailbreak scrambles that we're starting to see more and more and more of. And the best part is, Bill, as we start to see more of these jailbreak scrambles, defenses have to account for them. We are starting to see, including the first play of the game that, or not first, the second play of the game where Dante Pettis got offensive pass interference on exactly the play I'm about to talk about, but plays where Fields rolls out, finds a guy downfield. I liked Fields' guts. I liked the idea on that lofted ball to, I don't remember who it was, that Trayvon Diggs almost intercepted with one hand. I mean,
I didn't have a problem with that throw.
Most corners bite. Most corners are coming downhill eventually. Lofting that ball up and taking a shot doesn't bother me, because if you make the play, it's huge. So I feel like on the offensive line in particular, we are starting to see some players show up that might be huge cap savings going forward. Because I think you'll agree with me, Bill, if Braxton Jones is an acceptable left tackle, let alone if he's good, but if Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins are acceptable at their position, then theoretically you could bring Whitehair back. I cannot remember if this is the last year of his deal, but you could bring Whitehair back, you could sign a center, and you could draft a right tackle, or maybe you don't. And you can put together a solid offensive line. You could potentially even roll with Larry Borum and say that the right tackle spot's going to be just okay, and just not run that way and quite as often, or at least not give him major responsibilities. The point is that if Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins continue to play as well as I would swear that they are playing, because they just went up against the number 2 defensive line, or like number 2 defense in DVOA as well, that's great for the outlook of the future Chicago Bears, because those are expensive positions that you don't have to spend much money at.
Yeah, and look, they may go out there and, splash $20 million at right tackle kind of thing and try and beef up the line there. Maybe they believe in Borum. I don't believe in Borum. I've said that. I've been pretty consistent about that. I know he's still popular amongst a lot of Bears fans. It's not that he's terrible. He's not the worst out there, but I think he's a swing tackle. I don't think he should be starting. I've said, and I've mentioned this on my podcast countless times, that I thought Jones, Whitehair, Patrick, Jenkins, and Reef is the best starting line at this with this group. That is the absolute best starting line going left to right that they could possibly put out there. We haven't seen it yet together. I would still love to see what that group can do together, especially because I think Riley Reef's ankle might be okay enough where he might be able to hold up out there. Now, I assume when Borum's ready to come, off his concussion and back on the field, that he will be back in at starting right tackle. But for me personally, in terms of growing Justin Fields, I'd like to see Reef out there because I'd like to see, I think, a little better protection, which I think he probably would provide. And at the same time, I don't need to see Borum develop because I don't think Borum is more, maybe a little better than what he's shown, but I don't think there's that much more ceiling to be reached with Larry Borum. So
the nice thing is you want a tackle that's good at something. Right. At least offer me a plus somewhere. And while Braxton Jones, look, I'll be honest with you, Bill, Braxton Jones has not looked like a plus pass protector.
No.
But he's a plus run blocker. And so if at least he can be a push in pass protection, you've got something. Right now, I understand that Larry Borum has really solid pass blocking grades on PFF. And PFF, the grades, in my opinion, Bill, look, I know there's some people out there that just hate him. I think they are an opinion. That's like hearing Chris Sims hates X player or quarterback, right? It matters as much as Chris Sims' opinion, for better or for worse. Larry Borum's pass blocking has looked incredibly uninspiring to me. I understand that there are plenty of people that love the fact that he doesn't, get beat normally, but he gets pushed all the way back into the quarterback with consistency, especially with any rusher that can play with power. And I get it, saying, wow, he struggles against elite edge rushers. Sounds like that's a lot of players in the league, but Bill, there are elite edge rushers all over the league.
Sure.
I mean, it is hard to start a week where you don't play a top 10 pick, whether they're performing well or not. But what I will say, okay, so you mentioned a name that got me thinking. I know this is a weird segue, but I do want to ask you, is there a player that, as we close up, before we do final thoughts, has been surprising you? Because while he had a nasty drop today, Velus Jones took another 2 carries for 33 yards. Velus Jones, for as much as I think he gets a lot of deserved flack for not being able to field a punt, was wide open deep downfield and made a physical mistake. He actually looks kind of dangerous. And as he's getting more integrated into the offense, it's not that I have high hopes for him. Bill, we're talking about a 3rd round pick, not a 2nd or a 1st rounder, but he looks like somebody that could be a viable role player, even in a world where the Bears completely overhaul the top 3 receivers and put Mooney somewhere in there. As a wide receiver 4, as a gadget player, he's somebody that I actually think could become, say, like the KC Mecole Hardman kind of role, where you say, oh, shoot, I forgot about him, and now he's in the end zone. I mean, he runs hard.
So I'm not as positive on Velus as you are. Yes, he's got afterburners, and he can get down the field. Absolutely. And that is going to be helpful to this offense. And, no doubt about it. He has some physical traits, but the mistakes and the issues far outweigh the positives for me right now. I mean, he's been yanked off punt return already. And this was the guy who was part of the reason he was brought in, was to be a returner, and he can't catch punts. So, there's been, he drops the ball against Fields. Now, was he there? Yeah, he had his defender beat. But to me, there is some concern that, there are plenty of guys with physical traits. I mean, John Ross can beat everyone in a 40-yard dash, but he's nowhere to be found. Tavon Austin, tremendous, kind of talent and physical specimen, but never really turned into anything in the NFL. So there are guys like that you sit there and go, God, they could be such a weapon, but you just don't know yet. And I think there's just still too many questions around Velus to get too excited. I did see, someone with an idea today on Twitter that maybe he'd be a better running back than a wide receiver, maybe more of a Tariq Cohen than a Deebo Samuel. And I know he's not Deebo Samuel, but when he was drafted, everyone goes Deebo Samuel. So, I'm just bringing that up, but and Samuel is a guy who got run. So I'm not saying that that's not, potentially there, but maybe having him in the backfield more, I don't know. that's something I think that Luke Getsy is going to have to kind of figure out more, and Velas is going to have to figure out more exactly how to succeed in this offense. But look, he's got physical traits, and when your wide receiver core is what it is, is he ever going to be a top 3 wide receiver at this point? It's way early in his career. I get that. I don't think he's going to be. Like you said, a gadget wide receiver 4. Yeah, that may be something where he can make a splash play, once a game or once every other game. I think that's a possibility. But in terms of being a consistent guy who's getting 30 snaps a game, 25 snaps a game, I don't see that in his future. I need to see more from him before I'm going to speak too positively.
Well, of course. I think, Bill, it's all a matter of remembering the player we're talking about, right? I think a lot of people have unfairly decided that Velus Jones needs to be more than a normal 3rd-round pick is because he was the first receiver taken in a year where people felt like Justin Fields didn't get enough help, right? I mean, let's say that Velus Jones had been added to an already really solid receiver room. The plays that he's starting to make, because remember, he had a hurt hamstring. He missed all of training camp. Sure. He missed the first 4 weeks. He is not up to speed on the offense. And I have to imagine that he's going to get more involved. It's not that I think, to be clear, Bill, it's not that I'm trying to excuse him for things. It's more that when I look into the future, we are getting as good as we could get from ESB right now. Asking for more from ESB is asking for the moon, truly, because he's not going to suddenly get more sudden, right? But Velus Jones, if he can run a post route from the slot, if he can run, like when he got open, he didn't get open because the defense forgot about him. It sucks he dropped the ball, but it looked like he just beat him with speed. That's something that the defense eventually has to account for. And like you're talking about, I mean, is he going to be a 25, 30 snap a game guy? I don't know. But doesn't every Super Bowl team, if I'm going to go all the way there, Bill, let's drink the Kool-Aid a little bit. Doesn't every Super Bowl team have that one guy that makes 2 to 3 plays a game and that's about it? But those 2 to 3 plays get you first downs, keep the chains moving, and ultimately help you win games. You do need a roster. I mean, like Travis Gibson, you said way earlier in the podcast, like, are we looking to throw him out? You need rotational guys. You need depth. If there's anything positive we can say about the Bears right now, they are loading up on quality second stringers. I mean, not everybody's going to be one, right? But Dominique Robinson, Travis Gibson, Kendall Vildor, Velus Jones, these guys look like players that you might be able to do something with at this stage, or once they get a little bit more acclimated, get some more time in the league, and you just need them for a game or two, right? Let's say that the top 3 receivers, somebody's hurt. Velus is pressed into the role where he has to be a wide receiver 3. How bad is it going to be? I don't really know because we haven't seen him fully caught up in the offense, but was there any player, to segue back to you though, that surprised you today, if not for Velus, that we haven't talked about yet?
Let's see. In terms of anyone that jumped off the page, no one jumped off the page, but I will say that N'Keal Harry has a purpose. I think, he's a big body. He's a good blocker. And, could he have a role on this team next year? I think that's a possibility. Not as a wide receiver 2 or anything, but as a body and a guy that can get in the rotation on the back end of the wide receiver core. I liked what I've seen there the last couple of weeks. Again, like I said, he's not going to be a 6-catch, 65-yard guy with a touchdown. That's not going to be his role in this offense. But in terms of, like you said, like Velus could be useful, like N'Keal Harry can be useful if he's used properly. So, that was a pleasant surprise. But I think overall, I guess if you want, and we talked about him a little bit, and again, I'd want to go back and look and make sure I'm not, speaking incorrectly. I thought Riley Reif played pretty well, and I had heard that his ankle was still a major problem, but it seemed to hold up okay. So, that was a positive there. But, in terms of individual performances on the defense, there are none that are popping off the page for me after 40
minutes. Right. Final thoughts on the game, Bill. What you got?
Well, here's what I want to do for final thoughts for today, because I want to talk about, obviously, Justin Fields is the guy that we've been talking about a lot, and we spent the huge chunk of the first half of this podcast talking about him. And, for people like myself that had an issue with how Ryan Poles set up this offense, and I'm not going to go into everything, because traditionally second year is the year where you really see quarterbacks come into your own and you kind of have your answer by the end of year 2 if this guy is going to be, top 12 in the league or if you need to keep looking. But the one guy that the development was a little slower was Josh Allen. And am I saying he's going to, Justin Fields is going to be a top 2 quarterback in the league next year and the year after that? No, he obviously has further to go. But you keep hearing the Josh Allen comparisons. So I went back and looked at year 2 of Josh Allen. And what happened with Josh Allen out of the gate in year 2 is he was atrocious. He was horrible to start in year 2. Then he started to come into his own, but a lot of people had already written him off and weren't really paying attention. So Josh Allen, in his final 11 games of the 2019 season, completed 58% of his passes. I'll give you some of the stats. I know some of these are volume numbers, but 2,200 yards, 17 TDs, 3 interceptions. He was still sacked 29 times in those 11 games, and he had 380 yards rushing at about a 4.9 clip with 6 touchdowns. His yards of attempt, which is one that you can kind of carry over here, 6.71. So, that's if you eliminate Allen's first 4 games of the year.
Right.
If you eliminate Justin Fields' first 4 games of the year and just kind of focus on, now I'm not eliminating the Washington game. Keep that in mind. Washington game is part of this. We're talking Minnesota, Washington, and now New England and Dallas. 59 for 92. That's at 64%. So right now, 6% higher than what Josh Allen was in year 2. He is passer rating. I know it's flawed. Josh Allen, 92.1. Justin Fields is now at 97.6. Fields has been sacked 15 times. So, that's going to be a significantly higher sack percentage than what Josh Allen was at. But yards per attempt, where Allen was at 6.7, 7.9 for Justin Fields.
Ooh.
And 277 yards rushing at a 6.6 yards clip, and he's got 2 touchdowns already. So right now, Justin Fields here in these last 4 games, except for sacks and the interception ratio a little bit, Justin Fields is at or better than where Josh Allen, how Fields is playing now, where Josh Allen was those back 11 games of 2019. So if Fields, the way Fields has been playing, starting with basically the second half of the Minnesota game, moving forward here, and like I said, and I know the Washington game, I don't blame Fields on that. I think that was a lot of terrible offensive line play and terrible scheming from Luke Getsy. But overall, when we're looking at these games, if Fields keeps this performance going, he is going to be on a similar track to what Josh Allen was. And if you're going to have a top 10, top 12 quarterback in the league, which I think everyone agrees is what you need to be a competitive team in the Super Bowl, then Fields is on his way. Again, if you use the Josh Allen trajectory, he can be that guy, next year and the year after.
Absolutely. Bill, I think this was, I think this was Fields' best game of his career. Obviously, I'm going off instant reaction, right? But for as good as he looked and as efficient as he looked last week, this week, Dallas made him earn every single yard that he had. He had to throw with guys in his face. He had to he had to stand tough in tough pockets. He had to work arm angles, at least 5 to 7 arm angle throws just to get little short gains. He had to Houdini his way out of pockets, break tackles, run plays well, throw hard fakes. There were so many things that Fields had to do to keep the ball moving. But at the end of the day, Bill, we are starting to spend so much time picking apart yards per game, yards per attempt, EPA per play, quarterback rating. At the end of the day, it is about leading drives and scoring points. And there has been a correlation for years between explosive plays and points. And so everybody looked at the Bears because they had tons of explosive plays, next to no points, Bill. And they said, one of these two has to change. Either this offense is going to regress in their explosion rate, or they're going to, and nobody actually gave them, the other side of the coin, because that's just what everybody said. But there was always the other option where they just started scoring more points. And suddenly we're seeing the Bears go up against Bill Belichick and one of the best defenses in football scored a ton of points. The Dallas Cowboys and one of the best defenses in football scored a ton of points. It is not as simple as saying they're going to roll everybody. Quarterback development isn't linear, and games exactly like this are why you say that, because somebody says he scored 29 against the Cowboys. Why didn't he score 80 against the Dolphins, right? Why didn't he score 45 against the Lions? It might be more realistic. But I thought Fields looked in control. I thought Fields looked good. I thought he distributed the ball where it needed to be, and he allowed his team to fail him instead of him becoming part of the problem that his team needed to lift up, right? That's all of the semantic context that we've been looking for. I mean, simply put, everybody keeps wondering, why do we focus so much on Josh Allen, right? First of all, we don't have a whole season of Jalen Hurts, who was the last quarterback to be written off in year 2. We don't have a whole season of Tua Tagovailoa, for better or for worse. So we can't necessarily point to him either. But more importantly, Bill, how many examples do we really have in NFL history of a quarterback not seeing like offensive investment for their second year and still playing well? What does it statistically look like when a quarterback is playing well on a team that's given him nothing? We don't have a lot of examples to pull from because it's rare, right? Fields all the same. I could care less. I mean, he's hitting big throws. He's got way more, I would say, tough completions, just throws that are hard to hit, than he has massively inaccurate passes. And he has some inaccurate passes. That throw to Dante Pettis that Pettis had to pull it away from his man probably was a pick, but Pettis made the play, and guys throw stuff like that all the time. I mean, simply put, Bill, I will take a quarterback that gives me 3 touchdowns per interception. That doesn't bother me. The occasional turnover sucks, but it's not that big a deal. I loved watching Fields in this game. I hope he builds, but most importantly, Bill, this was such a turnabout from how we felt after the Texans game, where it was like, oh gosh, is this whole year for nothing? Similar way to the way that we felt after the Washington game. Is this whole year for nothing? And if nothing else, this is starting to make it look like Luke Getsy and Justin Fields have found an offense that they could agree on. People wondered, Bill, I'll close with this because it's becoming too long of a rant, but people wondered how on earth you could possibly develop Justin Fields given the lack of receivers around him. And I think we're seeing it. What it looks like is that the Bears needed to figure out what base template offense they were even going to work off of before they invested. If they went out and got a vertical stretch receiver and then they didn't end up liking Fields in a vertical stretch offense, what do you do with the guy you just paid a bunch of money? Right? Now the Bears know what they're looking for. They're starting to know what they need to find. They need to find better offensive line. They need to find better defense, like not better defense in general, better defensive linemen. They need to go get you a receiver, at least one that can break loose on the outside. A Quentin Johnston from TCU comes to mind, DK Metcalf type player that I think Fields could do really, really well with, so that they can stretch the field and open more things up for Darnell Mooney. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about here, but if the Bears leave this season where Fields is healthy, keep your fingers crossed, and the Bears have found an offense that they can really build off of, they'll better understand who they need to get, when they need to get them. And that is exciting. Bill, thank you so much for jumping on with me. I know we went a little bit long, but go ahead and tell the people where they can find you and your work.
So, you want to follow me on Twitter? It's at Zimmerman SXM. And of course, the podcast, the Bears Banter, not Bear With Me. I almost said Bear With Me. Bears Banter is my weekly podcast during the season, and occasional podcast in the off season. But yes, that will be on the Windy City Gridiron podcast channel, which of course you can find, wherever you get your podcasts. So you want to check it out. Courtney Cronin had a great conversation with her last week, ESPN's Beats, and there's still plenty of relevant conversation in there. You can go check that out. But, plan on having great guests week in and week out, and that's the plan this week as well.
Should be a killer one, Bill. Next up, we've got the Dolphins, but before we get there, I'll see you guys on All 22 Tuesday as we go through the film. And obviously, we'll talk a lot about Justin Fields. We'll watch as much as the defense as we can stomach. But until then, bear down, and thanks so much for bearing with me. Bill, that clears us. I am on baby duty, so I actually have to run this time, guys. I don't have time for the therapy session, but you guys are great. Bill, you are great. Let's enjoy the rest of a wonderful football Sunday. Bill, I am on cloud 9. I feel like the Bears did something so much more important than winning, because what does today's game really matter? I guess it matters a little bit, but for crying out loud, Bill, you tell me, if the Bears could score 24 points against the Jets, I mean, you got to think that's a win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, and I didn't get a chance to say this in the pod, but I've said it on my own pod 5,000 times. Justin Fields is such a talent with the deep ball accuracy in his legs. He's going to make big plays every game, but it's the other plays that he was failing at miserably early on. I've said all along, I want him to stack plays where he runs 3, 4, 5, they may not be perfect, but they're good plays, good decisions by him. And the last 2 weeks, we have really seen it. He is stacking solid play after solid play, and not, all right, there's a great play and there's another great play. And suddenly the Bears are on the 30, the opponent's 35-yard line. And then he takes the 14-yard sack, and that's the end of the drive. Right. So that you have to love to see.
Oh, love it. I mean, it has actually started to feel lately like Fields is making the opposing defense earn their sacks, which I really like. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, man, it is so tough to tell off the instant reaction. But whenever they showed the replays of these sacks, it actually didn't look like there was anybody open. And I mean, take the 2-point conversion, for instance, the first one, right? What's he supposed to do? I wish, just for my own sake, right, just to make me feel less crazy, I wish they had some kind of a stat, so to speak, that allowed us to understand how many sacks a quarterback has avoided. Because while Fields has taken a bunch of sacks, there are also a bunch of other dead to rights sacks that I feel like Fields has gotten away from that most other quarterbacks in the league don't. And so it's been wild to watch. Can't wait for more next week. He's becoming, I mean, Bill, okay, so I will say this. This is the most homer thing I've said today, but I'm going to say it anyways. So just get ready, right?
All right.
Trevor Lawrence, it plays in Jacksonville. And he should probably count his lucky stars he does, because it means that not as many people are really paying attention to a shocking decline in play, where he started as well as he did, but has descended. I won't say it's coming, that would be too jinxy, but if things do work out, I mean, Chicago's the kind of market where all eyes would be on Justin Fields. And I know you are in the media, you attend Super Bowl week. It's got to be exciting on your end to potentially have a quarterback worth talking about.
Oh, and that's the thing. And I think that's what it's exciting. If Justin Fields becomes a top 10 QB in the NFL, I'm not talking about top 3. I'm talking about top 10.
Kyler Murray-ish, Derek Carr-ish.
Yeah, but has the ability to make big-time plays within the body of work, game in and game out. And maybe you like your noon start Central Time, but the Chicago Bears are going to be on primetime TV 5-6 times a year. They're going to be on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, Thanksgiving. And Justin Fields, because of the swagger he has and the market that Chicago is, and how much being in the media, how much the NFL and how much the networks want the Chicago Bears to be good, because the Chicago market drives football ratings. That's why the Bears are on primetime as much as they are when they go 5-12 now, kind of thing, because the rating is still good, because the Bears fans come out of the woodwork to watch their team. If they ever got good, they would be one of the most highlighted teams week in and week out. And Justin Fields, even if he wasn't one of the top 5 QBs in the league, would be one of the top 5 biggest stars in the league.
Oh, I mean, I just can't even imagine what that would be like. I mean, is that part of why the Bears don't head to London and other games like that often, where it doesn't seem like the NFL ever really does pigeonhole the Bears as much as sometimes we would want them to, right? I remember we went into that Sunday Night Football game going, why do they keep putting us on primetime television? This is the worst.
Because when you look at Sunday Night Football, if you go and find one of the websites that does TV ratings, and you look at Sunday Night Football and you look at Bears-Packers, and the Packers slaughter them like they do on every Sunday Night Football game for the most part, it's one of the top 5 rated games of the year. Because people watch. They love watching the Bears. So just imagine how much they'd love him if they were good.
Oh my goodness. I can't. I want to. I can't. Not yet anyways. It's one of those where, I mean, honestly, Bill, at what stage do you become comfortable enough with your quarterback that apparently never, because looking at Green Bay right now, fans across the Wisconsin Metroplex or whatever, I don't know if they have a Metroplex, but like fans all over Green Bay Nation are ready to throw Aaron Rodgers out. You look at Cowboy Nation, and it was rush time when like after a couple of wins. The future is now, right? And Dak came out and he diced us up. I mean, you ask any Raiders fan, there have always been pro-car, anti-car camps. You ask any, honestly, I'm sure there are Ravens fans that want to trade Lamar. I'm sure there are Arizona fans that think that extending Kyler was a horrible decision. Maybe we never really get out of this whole quarterback run race or rut. You know what I mean? But it would be awfully
maybe
fun.
not. But I'll tell you what. I mean, in my lifetime, the most comfortable I have ever been at quarterback was Jim McMahon. And that's because I was a kid and didn't quite understand everything. And two, you were still paranoid that every time a fly landed on his shoulder pad, it was going to separate and he was going to be out for the rest of the year.
Right.
Like he was so injury prone. So there has never been a quarterback and that's 40 years of football now that I've been comfortable with. And Fields is going to be the best chance to be that guy. And I think he will be eventually.
Sure hope so.
He will be.
All the same, Bill, I got to run.
All
Great
right.
stuff. Catch you soon.
Talk to you soon.
You bet.
Thanks, everybody.